before Athens, before Sparta, before classical Greece. For nearly 600 years, a powerful Bronze Age civilization dominated the Greek mainland and the Aegean. They built massive stone fortresses, ran complex palace economies, traded across the Mediterranean, and spoke the earliest known form of Greek. They were the Mycenaeans, and their rise and collapse shaped the world that followed. Arrival of Proto-Greek speakers, 2,100 years before Common Era. Let's start before the Mycenaeans even exist. Around the turn of the 3rd to the 2nd millennium BCE, new groups arrive in mainland Greece. These people speak an Indo-European language, early Greek. We don't have texts from them yet. What we see instead is change in material culture. Settlement patterns shift. Burial customs evolve. Over time, a new linguistic and cultural layer takes root. These Proto-Greek speakers, people speaking an early form of the Greek language, don't appear overnight, and they don't wipe out what came before. They mix with local populations, but their language survives. That matters, because this linguistic base will later become Mycenaean Greek, and much later, Classical Greek. Without these early Greek-speaking communities, the Mycenaean world could not have formed. Second, early Mycenaean elite burials. By around 1700 BCE, something new is clearly happening. At Mycenae, one of the clearest early Mycenaean centers, archaeologists uncover shaft graves, deep burial pits used for elite burials, filled with extraordinary wealth. Weapons, gold, imported objects. These are not ordinary burials. They belong to a rising warrior elite, people who control land, labor, and long-distance connections. Their graves are statements of power. What's important here is not just the gold. It's the network behind it. These elites are plugged into trade routes reaching Crete, the Aegean Islands, and beyond. Mycenaean society is becoming visibly hierarchical. Third, strong Minoan influence. At this point, the most powerful civilization in the Aegean is still the Minoans of Crete. The Mycenaeans know this, and they borrow heavily. Minoan artistic styles appear in mainland Greece, so do religious symbols and administrative practices. Even writing traditions begin to influence the mainland. This isn't simple copying. The Mycenaeans choose what to take and what to leave. They are learning how power works in the Aegean and adapting it to their own, more militarized society. Fourth, Mycenaean takeover of Crete. Around 1450 BCE, the balance of power shifts. Across Crete, many major Minoan centers are destroyed. Knossos, the largest and most important palace, survives but under Mycenaean control. Administrative records at Knossos now appear in Linear B, a writing system used to record the Greek language, not Minoan. From this point on, the Mycenaeans dominate the Aegean. Crete becomes part of their world, not the other way around. This is a turning point. Fifth, development of major palace centers. With dominance comes organization. Across mainland Greece, major palace centers emerge or expand. Mycenae, Pylos, Tiryns, Thebes. These are not just royal residences. They are administrative machines. Inside them, officials manage production, storage, labor, and religious offerings. Everything is counted. Everything is recorded. This palace system is where Mycenaean power is organized and controlled. Sixth, Linear B and administration. To run this system, the Mycenaeans use Linear B. This is the earliest written form of Greek we know. The tablets are practical. They list sheep, grain, oil, workers, and offerings to gods. No literature, no myths, but they tell us a huge amount about how the system works. They confirm that Greek is now firmly established on the mainland, And in writing. 7th, formalization of Mycenaean religion. The tablets also tell us something else. They record the names of gods: Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Athena. These are not yet the gods of later temples and myths, but they are recognizably the same figures. Religion is closely tied to the palace. Offerings are organized, festivals are scheduled, priests and priestesses are recorded. This is an early form of Greek religion taking shape. 8. Expansion into Anatolia and the Hittite world. At the same time, the Mycenaeans are active well beyond Greece. Across the Aegean, in Anatolia, the Hittite Empire dominates much of the region, and in Hittite diplomatic records, a powerful foreign land appears under the name Ahiyawa, generally understood to refer to the Mycenaean world. These are not myths or later traditions. They are official Hittite documents, letters and diplomatic correspondence, and they treat Ahiyawa as a serious political power. In these texts, Mycenaean rulers appear as rivals and negotiating partners. They are involved in disputes over Western Anatolian cities, supporting local leaders and competing for influence along the coast. Some conflicts are indirect, fought through allies rather than open war. What matters is the status implied in these records. The Hittites do not describe Ahiyawa as a minor state. In one famous letter, the Hittite king even addresses the ruler of Ahiyawa as his brother, a title reserved for great powers. By the 14th and 13th centuries BCE, the Mycenaean world is no longer just a regional culture. It has become part of the wider Bronze Age international system, operating on the same stage as the major powers of the Eastern Mediterranean. 9. Mycenaean Cyprus. One of the most important areas of Mycenaean expansion is Cyprus. From around the 14th century BCE, Mycenaean presence on the island becomes increasingly visible. Settlements appear in multiple regions. Mycenaean pottery spreads widely, replacing or blending with local styles. Over time, Greek language and cultural influence begin to take root alongside existing traditions. This is not just trade at a distance. In many places, it appears to be long-term settlement. Mycenaean communities live, work, and die on Cyprus, tying the island directly into the Mycenaean world. Cyprus matters because of copper. Copper is one of the essential ingredients for making bronze, the metal that underpins Bronze Age life. Weapons, tools, armor, and everyday objects all depend on it. Without reliable access to copper, large-scale production and military power are impossible. Cyprus is one of the richest sources of copper in the Eastern Mediterranean. Control over Cypriot copper gives the Mycenaeans a major economic advantage. It strengthens their trade networks, supports their military capabilities, and links them to regions as far away as Anatolia, the Levant, and Egypt. By the late Bronze Age, Cyprus is no longer a peripheral island. It is a key hub in Mycenaean trade and power across the Eastern Mediterranean. 10. Peak of Mycenaean power. By the late 13th century BCE, Mycenaean power reaches its peak. Mycenaean ships move constantly across the Aegean and beyond. Mycenaean pottery and goods appear widely, a sign not just of trade, but of influence and presence. On land, the palace system is operating at full capacity. Agricultural produce, raw materials, and labor are drawn in, managed, and redistributed through the palace. This is a tightly coordinated system. Officials oversee storage, workshops, and supply chains. Craftsmen specialize. Farmers produce for more than local needs. The palaces sit at the center of it all, linking economy, administration, and power. The scale is larger than anything seen in Greece before. Major centers likely support tens of thousands of people, while hundreds of thousands live across the wider Mycenaean world, connected, directly or indirectly, to palace authority. This is the Mycenaean world at its most extensive, most connected, and most powerful. 11. Cyclopean Fortifications. Then something changes. Around 1250 BCE, the major Mycenaean centers begin to fortify themselves on an unprecedented scale. At Mycenae, Tiryns, and other sites, massive defensive walls are built or significantly reinforced. These are the Cyclopean Fortifications, walls made from enormous irregular stone blocks, some weighing several tons. Later, Greeks believed only Cyclopes could have built them. These walls are not symbolic. They are practical, strategic defenses. They protect palace complexes, control access points, and in some cases, incorporate hidden passageways leading to underground cisterns, secure water supplies designed to withstand long sieges. What's striking is that these fortifications appear across the Mycenaean world at roughly the same time. This suggests not a local problem, but a shared sense of rising danger. Whether the threat came from rival kingdoms, internal conflict, raids from the sea, or instability further east, the Mycenaeans were preparing for sustained violence. The fortifications tell us something important. By the mid-13th century BCE, Mycenaean elites no longer assumed that the system would hold on its own. Power now had to be defended in stone. 12. Late Bronze Age conflict. Between about 1250 and 1200 BCE, the Eastern Mediterranean enters a period of sustained instability. Across the region, long-standing political balances begin to break down. Mycenaean kingdoms on the Greek mainland, Hittite-controlled territories in Anatolia, and smaller powers along the Aegean coast are drawn into cycles of rivalry, conflict, and shifting alliances. Control over key cities, trade routes, and coastal access points becomes increasingly contested. At the same time, Egyptian records begin to mention groups known collectively as the Sea Peoples, mobile raiders and migrants moving across the eastern Mediterranean by land and sea. These groups attack coastal cities, disrupt trade routes, and place additional pressure on already strained political systems. Some scholars have suggested that parts of the Mycenaean world may have been involved in these movements, either as victims, participants, or displaced populations. Others see the Sea Peoples less as a single invading force, and more as a symptom of wider collapse. Waves of instability caused by famine, climate stress, warfare, and the breakdown of palace economies. Later Greek traditions, including the story of the Trojan War, are set in this late Bronze Age world of fortified cities, powerful kings, and constant tension. Troy itself occupied a strategic position controlling access between the Aegean and the Black Sea, making it a plausible focus of real geopolitical rivalry. The Trojan War, as told by Homer, is not a historical record, but it reflects memories of a violent, unstable world at the end of the Bronze Age, one shaped by conflict, migration, and the collapse of old systems. 13. Destruction of palace centers. Between 1200 and 1150 BCE, the Mycenaean palace system collapses. Across the mainland, major centers like Mycenae, Pylos, and Tiryns are destroyed or abandoned. Administrative control breaks down. Archives disappear. The networks that once coordinated production, labor, and trade no longer function. Writing ends, not because the language is lost, but because the palace bureaucracy that relied on linear B no longer exists. The palace system is finished. What caused this collapse? There is no single explanation. Archaeology points instead to multiple, overlapping pressures. Some sites show signs of violent destruction, suggesting warfare, either between Mycenaean kingdoms, attacks from outside groups, or raids along the coast. Other regions show patterns of abandonment that may reflect population movement rather than sudden attack. Natural factors may also have played a role. Earthquakes are common in the Aegean, and some sites show evidence of seismic damage. Climate stress, such as prolonged drought, may have weakened agricultural systems, making palace economies harder to sustain. There is also the possibility of systemic failure. The Mycenaean world was highly centralized. When trade routes broke down, resources became scarce, or political authority weakened, the entire system may have unraveled quickly. What's clear is the outcome. By the mid-12th century BCE, the great palaces are gone. The political and economic structure that defined Mycenaean civilization no longer exists. The Mycenaeans do not disappear, but their world does. 14. Post-Palatial Survival. But this is not the end of the people. In the decades after the palace collapses, life continues across much of Greece. Communities do not vanish overnight. Instead, they fragment. Large palace centers are abandoned, but smaller settlements remain occupied or are newly founded. Mycenaean traditions persist in everyday life. Pottery styles continue, though they become simpler. Greek is still spoken. Local leaders replace palace officials. Power becomes personal and local rather than centralized. This is a world without palaces, but not without people, memory, or culture. It is a period of survival and adjustment, bridging the collapse of the Bronze Age and the transformations that follow. 15. Transition into the Greek Dark Age. After around 1100 BCE, Greece enters what we call the Greek Dark Age. The word dark can be misleading. It doesn't mean that life stops or that people disappear. It means that the large, centralized systems of the Bronze Age are gone, and with them, many of the sources historians rely on. Writing disappears. Linear B is no longer used. Without palaces, there is no bureaucracy to keep records. Population declines in some regions as people abandon former palace centers and move into smaller, more defensible communities. Political organization becomes simpler. There are no great kings like the Mycenaean monarchs. Power is local. Communities are smaller, more flexible, and less tightly controlled. Greece becomes a landscape of villages rather than palace states. But this period is not empty or stagnant. People continue to farm, trade locally, and pass down traditions orally. Greek is still spoken. Many religious practices survive, even if temples and large cult centers do not. Stories of the Bronze Age, of heroes, kings, wars, and distant places, are remembered and retold, slowly taking on the form of epic poetry. Technologically and socially, change is also underway. Iron begins to replace bronze. New styles of pottery appear. Social structures adapt to a world without palaces, preparing the ground for new forms of leadership and community organization. Out of this long transformation emerges early Greek society, regional communities that will eventually grow into the city-states of later Greek history, places like Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and others. The Mycenaeans do not vanish from this story. Their language forms the foundation of later Greek. Their gods are still worshipped. Their memory lives on in myth and epic. The palaces fall, but the world they helped shape does not disappear. It changes, and from that change, the Greece we recognize begins to emerge. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something about the Mycenaeans. On this channel, we explore ancient civilizations of the Mediterranean and Mesopotamia. If you'd like to follow future videos, subscribing and liking really helps us continue making work like this.